So my name is Jessica Mays, and I am the Senior Director of Life Sciences at 2020 Onsite, which is a mobile optometry company. And Amy's description of a human-centered approach to solution design just resonated with me so deeply, both from where our company originates from and where we've gone in the last year. So I'm going to share that story with you. I'm going to give you some examples. Very excited to be here telling you about it. 7 years ago, 2020 Onsite was founded with the intention to bring eye care to people where they needed it. And at that particular time, what we discovered is that people really needed eye care at work. Preventative care is something that's really easy to bypass, especially if you're busy at work, if you're not sure who takes your insurance or how to find a provider, or even that taking an hour of your day to go see an eye doctor is just something that isn't feasible with your work schedule. And so we developed a delivery method that we call mobile vision clinics. And this is where we transformed the traditional optometrist experience from the confines of a brick and mortar optic shop into something that can fit completely inside of a 40-foot RV. And what we would do is partner with HR representatives or benefits coordinators at companies to bring our vehicle on site and to provide eye exams for their employees. This meant that we could check the insurance before we got there, so thereby eliminating the hassle of the patient of whether or not this particular office is going to take your insurance. And then once they came on board, they had the end-to-end experience. So a very simple check-in process. They were able to have pre-testing. They were able to see an optometrist in a traditional optometry lane, pick frames and glasses and actually order them with their prescription in them, all in about a 20-minute time frame, just stepping outside from work. This was very well received. We were doing great with business. It was March 2020. We also had a lot of clients in 3 major metropolitan areas. We were in Boston, Atlanta, and Chicago, and growing. And we had clients in different sectors as well. So we would see manufacturing sector where maybe someone needs safety glasses or they would need an eye exam as part of compliance. Or we'd go to a company like Wayfair and we'd be seeing that millennial tech generation who is not likely to take advantage of company provided benefits if it means leaving work. We had 5 vehicles out in the field, all running at full capacity. Full capacity is 32 patients in a day for us. And so things were excellent. And this was March 2020. So I think everybody knows what I'm about to say happened next, is that we had a business model that was really developed around people going to work. And come along April, people aren't going into work anymore. At the same time, we know that something is happening in clinical trials where they're having an issue of patient access to care. So because people couldn't go to the places that they used to, patients were at risk for missing really critical endpoints on the studies that they were participating in. Travel was suspended, or people didn't feel comfortable traveling. Sites were closed or at reduced capacity. And this posed a huge challenge. And let me just take a minute to say, in case you didn't know, like I didn't before this, that timing in clinical trials is so key. So the Institutional Review Board approves a schedule of events. And this means that these patients have to be assessed at a certain window in a certain time frame by certain machinery. And if that is missed, what can happen is that the patient might have to drop out of the trial. So the enrollment of the trial decreases. And if the enrollment of the trial decreases below a certain threshold, sometimes you have to start again with the trial. So there's a lot of money, time, and effort behind patient retention. And now the pandemic is posing the greatest patient retention issue that clinical trials had seen in a really long time. We happen to have some relationships with biopharmaceutical companies in the greater Boston area, because through that routine business that I described to you, we were going to companies like Novartis and Vertex and Biogen, who are doing some of this important clinical work that I just described. And they already knew us from the memorable experience that we provided to their staff. They had been on our vehicles and they had seen the patient experience firsthand. So that made it really easy to pivot into a conversation about how we could potentially repurpose these vehicles to start keeping clinical trials on track. And one of the things that I think really sped this conversation along is that even before the pandemic, we have these themes, these buzzwords of the decentralization of trials and patient centricity. So as Amy was saying, we're looking at the consumerism of healthcare. People aren't feeling as reimbursed for what their participation level is like they used to. So recruiting and retaining patients is already something that the industry is looking at. What more can we do? Except this was highlighted to an extreme with the pandemic. In some of the trials that we have been working on, patients have to travel long distances to the home site. So they might be flying from Montana to Miami. And while to me, a plane ticket to Miami sounds great right now, I haven't gone anywhere in a year. For this patient, this would mean not only taking that journey with the travel restrictions, crossing state borders. As we remember, all of the states had different rules about quarantine and travel. And then when they get there, they're not having the Miami vacation that I'm going to have. If we think about the person, like Amy said, and what we're experiencing here, this person is going in sometimes for a 6, 7, 8 hour long evaluation that is really intensive on their site and can give them headaches, can cause some pain. They can have fatigue afterwards. And so now they're in a foreign place and they've got this long day of testing, and then they're going back to a hotel. They're still doing all of this in a pandemic. So we were asking patients at this point, even if sites were open, to make this journey in a pandemic and to think about their family safety or their personal safety. If they were immunocompromised, this could be an even bigger journey for them. So what happened is we've got a patient stuck or purposefully at home for their own health. We have biopharmaceuticals and sponsors who are very stressed about the outcomes of their trials if they cannot figure out how to collect endpoints in the timeframes and windows. And then we have 2020 on-site who have these full optometry vehicles on wheels that are sitting idle right now because nobody's going to work. So how can we bring this together? How can we solve this problem for both of us? What needs to be done? And I'm going to highlight a little case study here of what we did with a company called AGTC, just to give you a sense of the actual process, the innovation process, and what went into it. So first, the sponsor had to take a big leap of faith and submit protocol revisions to the IRB, asking for permission to test their patients on mobile vision clinics, which had never been done before. So they're going through paperwork and processes that they've never had to face before. Then they have to put this in front of the IRB, and the IRB is there to protect the health and safety of the patient. And I have to think to myself, for the first one that we did, whoever was sitting on that IRB really understood the value of the human experience in this clinical trial and thought to themselves, the cost benefit of trying something new and innovative against the cost of a patient potentially missing this endpoint, having to stop this life-changing therapy is not worth it. I'm going to approve this. And I think that was a big leap at a time when the world was chaotic and everyone was a little scared about everything. And then from a 2020 on-site perspective, we had to completely modify our vehicles. So we needed to be prepared to go out into the pandemic world with barriers, with social distancing. We had to bring machinery on to the vehicles that we had never used before. We had to get trained on that machinery. In some cases, our team is now using equipment that there's only a few of in the world. And so they had to have very specialized training in order to conduct this. And then I think the most important relationship to highlight in the innovation of all of this is the sites themselves. So these sites have had a relationship with their patients, sometimes for 5 years. Sometimes these patients are children. And as you can imagine, as a healthcare provider, when you form that attachment to someone who's going through something that may or may not work or may not change their life in the way that they hope, it's a very emotional connection. You feel very protective of this patient. Now we're in a pandemic and we're asking to see this patient on behalf of the site. So they're going to have to relinquish the testing of this patient. And that took a lot of relationship building between us and the sites to say, listen, we're going to talk together. We're going to understand the quality of care that you want for your patient, and we're going to make sure to adhere to it so that you can communicate to your patient that this is a viable option so that they can stay enrolled in this trial, or so that they don't have to travel in order to stay enrolled in this trial. And then I think there's also an element of the certification. So when you do optometry clinical trials, you have to have the lanes certified. So I also want to mention this company called EMIS, who was certifying the lanes for this particular trial. And they had to come out and certify our lane and certify a mobile optometry lane for the first time ever. So just to recap, we've got the sponsor taking big risks, trying protocol amendments they've never tried before, the IRB approving things they've never seen before, a mobile vision clinic. We needed to recalibrate ourselves, our staff, our vehicles. The sites needed to trust us with their patients. And then the patients actually had to opt into this. So the good news is I'm here to tell you it worked. And we've seen over 100 patients in 24 states. We've done 4 trials, 3 indications, and phases 1 through 4, which is fantastic for me when I think about the mission that I said at the beginning of all of this, which is that 2020 was founded on the concept of bringing care when and where people need it. And now we've just found a new and different way to do that by listening to the patient, by understanding the need of the patient, the problem that was at hand, and solving it in a more patient-centric way. I will say we have a never done mentality with this right now. Everything that I just described to you really was version 1 of what we've done over the last year. We're at the tip of the iceberg, I think, with the push towards decentralization. So right now at 2020, we're asking ourselves, what more can we do? We're trying to get more creative. Can we, and we have done different sites and locations. So not just bringing care to the patient's driveway in our vehicle, but bringing it to a central location where 1 or more patients could be served. That we even have handheld devices. We have the potential to bring for modified in-home care. So really thinking deeply, it doesn't even have to be constrained to the offering that we think we know. We could offer things in new and different ways. Vision is also a niche part of the medical industry. And so our clinics are licensed as clinics, not necessarily vision clinics. And so we also have the option to bring on phlebotomy or vitals. And so when we think about the decentralization of trials, wearables is a big trend towards taking endpoints at home, but can we actually bring everything to the patient's driveway? Can the patient just walk out their front door, have their vitals checked, get some blood drawn, have a vision test, do a patient-reported outcome, and then walk right back into their house? We've also done a lot around enrollment. So diversity is a thing I think that is on the tip of the tongue for everybody. How do we get more diverse people involved in clinical trials? And what I see the future being here, especially with mobility as an element of enrollment for clinical trials, is that we can reach patients who otherwise wouldn't be reached. The brick and mortar nature of a site means that enrollment often is confined to a physical area around that site, or you're flying patients in. Either way, you have to find those patients and pre-screen them. So can we, using mobile vision clinics, put ourselves in locations that have a patient demographic that should be captured for this clinical trial, so we start to really support the diversity initiatives? And we're not the only ones doing things on wheels or doing things virtually or mobily. You know, home health nursing has been a big part of this for a long time. A company called Science 37 is working towards virtual sites. And there are other companies in the dental space, like Henry the Dentist or Virtudent, who have really tried taking these practices on wheels. And so this gets me really excited thinking about what the future of patient care looks like. Honestly, anywhere from the patient's home to the clinic to a Walmart parking lot, if that's where it's convenient for the patient, then I think that's where we can go.